Close your eyes for a moment and imagine that your mind is a sacred house. Not just any house, but a temple. A place built not with bricks, but with memories, with vibrations, with everything you've felt and tried to forget. Now, imagine that the doors of this house are wide open, left ajar by exhaustion, by fear, by the silent habit of letting the world in, even when it hurts. Maybe you didn't even notice. Maybe you thought you had to be kind. Maybe they taught you that being open was the same as being good, that absorbing everything was the price of love. But what if that's not true? What if your mind was never meant to be a sponge? What if it was meant to be a sanctuary? You wake up tired, you sleep surrounded by noise, you walk through the day feeling like something's leaking. And you can't explain what. It's not physical, it's not visible, but it drains you. It pulls at your thoughts, and slowly, without you realizing, it changes your energy, your focus, your choices, your life. This isn't just stress. This is energetic invasion. This is emotional contamination. This is a mind that forgot how to say no because it was never taught how to protect itself. And when the mind forgets its own boundaries, the soul begins to fade behind a fog of frequencies that aren't even hers. The truth is, your mind has a field, a real one, a vibrational structure that can either be porous or protected. And every day, this field is being shaped by the people you allow near, by the thoughts you let stay, by the environments you endure, most of all, by the way you treat your own silence. Karl Pribram, one of the great minds in neuroscience, believed that the brain doesn't just store memories, it holographically encodes reality itself, which means what lives in your mind lives in your world. What enters your mind echoes in your life. That's why protecting this field is not a luxury. It's not an extra step in your spiritual routine. It's the foundation. It's the gate. It's the act of reclaiming what is sacred within you. So this is not about fear. It's not about pushing people away. It's about remembering that your energy has a frequency, and that frequency shapes everything. When your mental field is open to everything, you lose the ability to create with intention. You absorb what isn't yours, and you manifest what you don't want. But you can change that gently, slowly, from within, because your mind isn't broken. It's just waiting for you to come back to the door and choose who you allow to enter. Let's begin. You don't always notice when it starts, the draining, the slow unraveling of your energy. It doesn't come with alarms. It doesn't knock on your door. It seeps in through a conversation that left you unsettled, through a space that felt heavy, but familiar, through thoughts that aren't even yours but echo inside like they belong. This is the invisible attack, the one that doesn't scream, but whispers, that doesn't hurt all at once, but erodes you drop by drop. Your mind is porous. It was built that way, to connect, to resonate, to absorb. But in a world so saturated with noise, that same openness becomes dangerous. Not because the world is evil, but because your field, when left unguarded, becomes a blank canvas for every chaotic vibration that passes through. Like a sponge left in muddy water, it soaks up everything and forgets what it was before. Science calls them mirror neurons, and they are always listening. They mimic, reflect, adapt. You sit near someone angry, and you feel tight. You walk into a room heavy with tension, and your breath shortens without reason. Your brain doesn't ask if it's yours, it just copies. That's how quickly your frequency can be overwritten, not by force, but by resonance. And if your awareness is elsewhere, in guilt, in distraction, in trying to be nice, you don't even notice it happening. You've been told to stay positive, to smile, to be light. But light that floats too far from the ground becomes escape. And escape isn't healing. Sometimes the brightest mask hides the deepest fracture. Spiritual bypassing, the kind that denies your shadows and pain, opens more breaches than it closes. Because light without roots doesn't protect, it dissolves, it pretends. And pretending weakens your field. You don't need more pretending, you need a shield. And that shield isn't about closing yourself off, it's about anchoring your presence, right here, right now. So let's create that space together, not as a technique to impress, but as a sacred gesture, a reconnection with your own field. Breathe in, hold, and exhale slowly. Again, let your breath become the rhythm that reclaims your space. Now visualize a light, not bright but warm, dense, protective. Let it form around your body like a layer. Feel it resting against your skin like a second presence. Place a simple thought inside it. This is my space, my vibration, my alignment. Breathe again. Feel it solidify, not from force, but from intention. This isn't imagination, it's structure. Your nervous system is listening. Your energy field is responding, and your consciousness, when aligned with your breath, your thought, your presence, becomes a firewall. Because you are not a sponge, you are a sacred house. And every time you lower your guard to be liked, to please, to avoid conflict, you abandon the altar inside. The altar that was never meant to be shared with noise, only with truth. Some people feel too much. They walk into a room and absorb everything. The unsaid tensions, the invisible sadness, the expectations floating in the air. They listen to a friend and feel like it's happening to them. They try to help and end up depleted. Not because they are weak, but because they are open, too open. And in a world like this, being open without boundaries isn't a gift. It becomes a wound. You've likely been told that being sensitive is beautiful, and it is, but no one told you how much it costs, how much it hurts to carry what is not yours, how it silently distorts your own emotions. That pain you feel at the end of the day, the one you can't explain, might not even be yours. It's the residue of everything you absorbed, trying to be good, trying to be enough. But just like your body needs a bath after being exposed to the world, your mind needs a vibrational cleanse. It holds on to psychic dust, energetic debris, frequencies that cling to you, not because you chose them, but because you forgot to clear them. When your mind stays unwashed for too long, your thoughts become cloudy. Your decisions lose coherence. You stop recognizing your own voice. And there's a reason for that. Your attention, the quiet, persistent light of your focus, is sacred. But when scattered across dozens of worries, dramas, and people's pain, it becomes a magnet for chaos. Wherever your attention goes, your field opens. And when your field is open for too long without direction, cracks begin to form, not physical ones, energetic, subtle, but powerful enough to shape everything. That's why you need a gate, an internal gate, not a wall, not a weapon, but a conscious passage between you and the world, a place inside where you decide what enters, what stays, what leaves. Close your eyes if it feels safe. Imagine yourself standing at a threshold, a quiet inner door. On one side is the world, on the other, you, just you. And you place your hand gently over your heart. Feel its rhythm, breathe into it, and say in your own mind, I am here, I choose what stays. Let that sentence settle, let it root. That is your gate, not to shut out love, but to welcome clarity, because being empathetic doesn't mean being fused with everything. Compassion isn't self-sacrifice. True sensitivity requires structure, like the deep-sea diver who wears a suit, not because they fear the ocean, but because they want to explore it without being swallowed by it. You can still love deeply, still care, still feel, but not at the expense of your own frequency. The moment you reclaim your gate, you stop confusing compassion with depletion. You stop losing yourself in the noise, and you start remembering what your energy feels like when it's whole, when it's yours, when it's home. There's a silence no one talks about, the silence of trying so hard to manifest something and watching it slip away over and over again. Not because you didn't want it enough, not because you didn't visualize it clearly, but because your field wasn't protected. The desire was real, but the channel was open to interference. Your mind is the origin point of every creation. Every image, every intention, every whispered hope is first born there, in the silence between thoughts. But if that space is not shielded, if it's crowded with fear, noise, or emotional residues from others, then what you project into the world is no longer clean. It becomes diluted, distorted, and life mirrors back a reality that isn't fully yours. Neuroscience shows us that the brain is deeply impressionable, especially in states of emotional vulnerability. Your limbic system, the part of your brain that processes emotion, doesn't distinguish between your pain and someone else's. It absorbs it all, stores it, repeats it. That's how limiting beliefs aren't just inherited from family or childhood. They are energetically inherited moment by moment from the environments you live in. You want to create abundance. You want to attract peace, connection, clarity. But deep down, the vibration of lack still echoes, not because you're broken, but because you're surrounded by voices, visible and invisible, that tell you you're not enough. And when your desire is rooted in fear, in urgency, in trying to fill a void, the frequency you send out is a plea, not a claim. And the universe responds not to your words, but to your vibration. That's why before desiring, you must first cleanse, protect, center. Let yourself become still. Feel the space behind your eyes. Let it soften. Let it widen. Now take a slow, deliberate breath and hold. Exhale slowly, as if releasing not just air, but residue. Feel the emptiness that remains. That's your foundation. That's where clear creation begins. In that space of silence, you're not forcing, you're not begging, you're remembering that your mind is the bow and desire the arrow. But if the bow is loose, scattered, unsteady, the arrow will never find its path. Manifestation isn't about intensity, it's about coherence. So pause, recenter, protect, then desire. Because when the field is clear, when your energy is anchored, what you send out returns with clarity. Not as a struggle, but as a reflection. Not as a test, but as a confirmation of a mind that finally remembered its own power. There are days when you feel drained, even if you've done nothing. When you lie down at night and your body aches, not from effort, but from a kind of invisible weight, a heaviness that doesn't belong to your muscles, it belongs to your field. And that's the first sign. Mental invasion rarely announces itself with loud crashes. It arrives quietly, through overstimulation, through unguarded absorption, through a mind too open, too exposed, too tired to say enough. Information was meant to serve us, to illuminate, to expand. But when it comes unfiltered, endlessly, it doesn't expand your consciousness. It floods it. And a flooded mind can't be intuitive. It can't feel the subtle movements of the soul. It switches into survival. It becomes reactive. And your inner voice, that sacred whisper, becomes buried beneath a storm of external noise. Empathy has long been misunderstood. It's often mistaken for carrying the weight of others. But carrying is not the same as caring. Absorbing pain does not heal it, it only multiplies it. When you mistake spiritual generosity for self-erasure, your field becomes compromised. And you begin to lose the thread of who you are beneath the pain that isn't even yours. So as the day ends, your mind deserves closure, not just rest, but ritual. A gentle command to return, to seal, to come back home, not out of fear, but out of reverence for the energy that keeps you whole. Let the breath slow. Let the room quiet. Place one hand on the center of your forehead, lightly, not as a gesture of control, but of remembrance. Breathe into that space and think, I release what isn't mine. I return to myself. Say it silently, once, slowly, then let it go. This isn't superstition, it's alignment. The mind, like a computer, needs boundaries, firewalls, not to reject life, but to preserve the sacredness of your internal world. Karl Pribram compared the brain to a holographic receiver, absorbing, interpreting, projecting. If the signal is open, anything can enter. If it's intentional, it becomes precise. And you're meant to be precise. Your frequency isn't random. Your presence isn't accidental. You are a channel, not for everything, but for what aligns. So let the field close gently tonight. Let the mind soften, then filter. Let silence become your gatekeeper. Because you don't need to carry the world to care for it. You only need to stay home within yourself. There's a quiet misunderstanding that echoes through the spiritual path, the belief that meditation is enough, that sitting in silence for a few minutes a day can cleanse what years of disconnection have left behind. But meditation without structure becomes a window left open in the middle of a storm. You may feel light for a moment, but when you return to the world without a shield, the noise enters again, often louder than before. Some minds remain wide open, not because they are free, but because they have forgotten how to filter. And when everything is allowed in, every thought, every feeling, every vibration, discernment disappears. Intuition turns into confusion. And the space once meant for divine connection becomes a passageway for illusion, sabotage, and subtle dissonance. There's a danger in opening the mind without anchoring the heart, in expanding consciousness without healing what it touches. Because what you expand, you also expose. And without inner coherence, the light you invite can be distorted by the shadows you haven't yet faced. The brain responds to its environment with exquisite precision. When exposed to chaos, visual, emotional, or vibrational, your prefrontal cortex, the seat of decision and focus, begins to dim, not forever, but enough to blur your clarity. And when clarity fades, you start making choices from fatigue instead of alignment, from fear instead of presence. And slowly, your life reflects a field you didn't consciously shape. So there comes a moment, gentle but necessary, when you need to interrupt the cycle. To place a hand between you and the habitual draining, not with aggression, but with reverence. Let your body settle, let your shoulders drop. And now, without rush, create a movement, a gesture that is yours, perhaps a sweep of the hand across your chest, or a press of fingers together, a pause, a breath, a thought. Not this time. That gesture is not just symbolic. It becomes a neurological anchor, a signal to your system that something old is being broken, that something sacred is being restored. Because opening your mind is not enough. If the heart is left unguarded, the expansion becomes exposure. And exposure without grounding is not evolution, it's exhaustion. Let your shield be soft but strong. Let it be loving but clear. Let it protect the very place where the divine whispers to you in silence. There's a quiet ache that comes from living a life of constant yes, a subtle erosion that begins when you silence your own needs just to maintain peace around you. It sounds noble, it looks kind, but deep inside, it leaves a void. Because every time you say yes without alignment, something within you whispers no and is ignored. You've been conditioned to believe that saying no is selfish, that setting a boundary means you are hard, distant, cold. But the truth is, your energy was never meant to be endlessly available. Your presence is not an unlimited resource. Even the sun sets, even the sea withdraws. When your frequency becomes shaped by everyone else's rhythm, you begin to forget your own. You start vibrating in someone else's song, and slowly, your nervous system enters a constant state of confusion, of effort, of fragmentation. Until one day, the very person you were trying to protect, yourself, is lost in the noise of overextension. And behind that tendency to always agree, there's often a story, A younger version of you who learned that being loved meant being needed, that safety meant pleasing, that to avoid rejection you had to anticipate the world's demands before they even arrived. But that child, though tender, is not who you are now. Your current self has the right to draw circles around their energy, to care deeply, without offering yourself as a sacrifice. Words shape vibration, and vibration shapes reality. So you don't need to shout, you don't need to explain. You just need to find a sentence that holds both love and firmness, a sentence that reminds your field, this is where I end, this is where I begin. Repeat it inside, quietly, with clarity. Feel how your breath responds, feel how your posture changes. That is your boundary, invisible but alive. Imagine now that your mind is a garden, a place where flowers grow, thoughts, feelings, visions, but a garden without a fence is soon trampled, not always by enemies, often by those who simply didn't see the sacredness of what was blooming, not because they meant harm, but because you forgot to guard it. You can be soft and still say no. You can be spiritual and still have limits. You can be open and still be protected. Because love without boundary isn't love, it's erasure. And your soul was not born to be erased. It was born to be whole. Fear rarely shouts. It whispers. It crouches in corners of memory. It hides behind your carefulness, your delays, your sudden exhaustion. And yet, it governs so much. Not the kind of fear that screams in emergencies, but the chronic, quiet kind. The one that teaches your mind to stay on alert even when nothing is wrong. The kind that leaves your field open, exposed, vulnerable, as if survival depended on constant readiness. For many, this started early. A moment of loss, a betrayal, an abandonment that was never fully processed. And from that moment on, the nervous system began to scan. Every word, every look, every silence became a potential signal of danger. The mind didn't mean to open itself that wide. It just wanted to survive. But survival is not the same as presence. And fear, when left unrecognized, disables your shield not with violence, but with exhaustion. The paradox is painful. The more afraid you are of being hurt again, the more porous your field becomes. Because fear makes you hyper-aware, hyper-available, hyper-reactive. And in that state, you absorb everything. You don't have time to filter. Your system confuses vigilance with love and begins to take in even what should be left outside. Trauma doesn't live in logic, it lives in vibration, in breath patterns, in how your body responds to silence. Your cells remember. The memory doesn't always come in images. Sometimes it comes as a tightening in the chest, a pause before trusting, a hesitation in joy. And while the mind tries to control, to fix, to understand, the energy keeps leaking. Not because you're broken, but because something sacred within you still feels unprotected. But you can return, not to the trauma, to the part of you that existed before it, to the part that still knows how to feel safe. That part has never left. It only went quiet, waiting for a signal. And that signal can be simple. A touch, a breath, a stillness that says, I'm here now and I will protect you. I place your hand gently on your chest. Let the warmth spread, not as a gesture of force, but as a gesture of return. Breathe deeply, slowly. Let the breath descend like light into dark water. With each breath, imagine a thread reconnecting, a thread between your awareness and your energy, between your soul and your shield, between your presence and your power. Because you are not the fear, you are the one who survived it, and your shield doesn't come from denial. It comes from truth. A truth that says, yes, I was hurt, but I am no longer defenseless. Your mind is a bridge, and even if it was broken, it can be rebuilt. Not in haste, not in noise, but in silence, in safety, in sacred return. Breathe, slowly. Feel, as if every cell in your body could hear this silence. Because your mind, it isn't damaged, it was never broken. It's simply forgotten for a while the way back to the sacred, and maybe protecting your frequency truly is the greatest act of love you can offer yourself today. A love that doesn't come from effort or resistance, but from the simple act of remembering, this inner space belongs to me. So I invite you to reflect, what if, from this moment on, every breath became a reminder that you no longer have to carry what isn't yours? What if, instead of losing yourself to the world, you chose to make your own presence your home? Let this question stay with you. And remember, with all the tenderness of your being, you are not broken. You are remembering who you are.